Hey everyone, welcome to Midnight Mystic Stories. I noticed a lot of you who are watching and enjoying the content aren't subscribed yet. If you love spine-chilling stories, creepy encounters, and unexplained mysteries, make sure to subscribe and turn on the notification bell. It really helps the channel grow and helps us keep bringing more of the content you love. And be sure to comment below where you are tuning in from. Thank you and enjoy the video. You're not going to believe this, but I actually swore off Tinder after this. I'm still kind of freaked out about it, to be honest. It started like any other dumb swipe fest, you know? Looking for a chill hang, maybe a movie night. Definitely not this. I matched with this guy named Ethan. His profile was normal, maybe a little too normal. Like, generic good-looking dude normal. He had the hiking pictures, the dog picture, always a plus, right? And the vaguely artsy, looking off into the distance picture. Red flag number one should have been the lack of anything weird about him. Everyone's got at least one weird thing, right? Anyway, we chatted for a couple of days. He was quick to respond, asked all the right questions, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He said he was a graphic designer, which, okay, cool. Seemed like a regular, boring job. We decided to meet up at this new coffee shop downtown. The Daily Grind, or something like that. The coffee shop was buzzing when I got there. It had that whole exposed brick, Edison bulb vibe. I spotted Ethan sitting at a table near the back, reading a book. He looked exactly like his pictures, maybe even a little better in person. He was tall, with dark hair and these seriously intense blue eyes. Seriously, they were blue. The date started off great. We talked about movies, music, and our families. He was funny, charming, and seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say. We even had some stuff in common, like a love for obscure 80s movies and a weird fascination with conspiracy theories. I actually started to think, okay, maybe this Tinder thing isn't so bad after all. Then things started to get off. It was subtle at first. He started asking me really specific questions about my apartment, like what floor I lived on, what kind of security system I had, if I had any roommates. I brushed it off as him just being curious, but it definitely felt a little weird. Then, he started talking about my social media. He mentioned a photo I had posted from a party a few weeks ago. Oh yeah, I saw you at that party. You look really pretty. Now, I know I didn't see him there. I definitely would have remembered those blue eyes. The thing is, I hadn't tagged the location of that party. It was at a friend's house, and I hadn't mentioned it to anyone. I laughed it off, trying to play it cool. Oh, maybe you saw someone who looked like me? But he just smiled, a really creepy, knowing smile, and said, no, it was definitely you. The rest of the date was a blur of paranoia. I felt like he was watching me, studying me. He kept making these little comments that made me think he knew way more about me than he should. Like, he knew my favorite coffee order, even though I hadn't told him. And he knew about this embarrassing thing that happened to me in high school that I'd only told, like, 2 people. I made an excuse to leave early, saying I had a headache. He walked me to my car, and as I was getting in, he leaned in close and whispered, I'll see you soon. It wasn't a question, it was a statement. I sped home, locked all my doors, and turned on every light in the apartment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being watched. I spent the next few days avoiding my apartment as much as possible, crashing at friends' places. I blocked Ethan on Tinder and all my social media. I even considered changing my number, but he still found me. One night, I was walking home from my friend Sarah's apartment. It was late, and the street was deserted. I heard footsteps behind me, getting closer and closer. I started to panic, my heart pounding in my chest. I turned around, ready to scream, and there he was, Ethan. He was smiling that same creepy smile. I told you I'd see you soon, he said. I froze, completely terrified. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. He started walking towards me, and I just stood there, paralyzed. Then, a car pulled up beside us. The driver rolled down the window, and I saw Sarah waving at me. Hey, you forgot your phone. I ran to the car, jumped in, and we sped away. I didn't look back. I spent the next few weeks looking over my shoulder, convinced that Ethan was going to show up again. I installed security cameras in my apartment, changed my locks, and started carrying pepper spray everywhere I went. Then one day, I got a call from the police. They said they had arrested someone for stalking and harassing several women in the area. They asked me to come down to the station to identify him. I went to the station, my hands shaking. They led me into a room and showed me a lineup of suspects. And there he was. Ethan. Except it wasn't Ethan. It was a different guy. He looked similar, but it wasn't the same person I had met on Tinder. He didn't have those intense blue eyes. The police explained that the guy they had arrested was using fake profiles to meet women online. He would then stalk them and harass them. I was relieved, of course, but I was also confused. If that wasn't Ethan, then who was the guy I had met on Tinder? Who was the guy who knew so much about me? And who was the guy who had followed me that night? I never found out. I deleted all my dating apps and decided to focus on meeting people in real life. But every now and then, I still catch myself looking for those blue eyes in a crowd. And I can't help but wonder, what if I hadn't forgotten my phone at Sarah's that night? Maybe, just maybe, I'm being dramatic. But it's enough to make you think, you know? I'm not usually one to share stuff like this, especially not online. But this Tinder thing, it seriously messed with me. And honestly, I just need to get it out there. Maybe someone will read this and think twice before swiping right, you know? It's not all cute coffee dates and finding the one. Trust me, I was bored one summer. Super bored. Like, staring at the paint drying kind of bored. I just moved to this small town, Harmony Creek. Yeah, ironic, right? Because my dad got a job at the local paper mill. Small town life wasn't exactly my thing coming from the city, and making friends was, well, proving difficult. So, like any self-respecting, lonely 19-year-old, I downloaded Tinder. I wasn't expecting much, mostly just looking for some conversation to kill time. And then I matched with Liam. His profile was pretty generic. A few pictures of him hiking. Harmony Creek was big on outdoorsy stuff, and a bio that said something about loving dogs and craft beer. He seemed normal enough, maybe a little on the quiet side, but definitely cute. We started chatting, and he was okay. Not a super witty conversationalist, but polite and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. We talked for a few days, mostly about the usual stuff. What I was doing in Harmony Creek, what he did for work, he was a mechanic, our favorite movies, that kind of thing. He suggested we meet up for coffee. I hesitated. Something about him felt off. I couldn't put my finger on it, but there was this weird vibe. But like I said, I was bored, and he seemed harmless. So I said yes. We met at this little cafe downtown, the Daily Grind. It was exactly as cheesy as it sounds. He was taller than I expected, and kind of lanky. He had these really intense blue eyes that kind of stared right through you. He was wearing a flannel shirt and jeans, the typical small-town uniform. The date started off okay. We talked about our families, our interests, the usual first date stuff. He asked a lot of questions about me, which was nice, but he didn't really offer up much about himself. When I asked him about his family, he just said they were around. When I asked about his friends, he said he didn't really have many. As the date went on, the weird vibe got stronger. He kept staring at me, not in a flirty way, but like he was analyzing me. He would ask these really specific questions like, "What's your favorite memory from childhood?" Or "What's your biggest fear?" It felt like an interrogation, not a date. Then he started talking about Harmony Creek. He said it was a special place, a place where secrets run deep. He said that the town had a history, a dark history, that people didn't talk about. He kept saying things like, "You'll never truly understand this place, not unless you were born here." I was starting to get really creeped out. I made an excuse about having to get home early and ended the date. He walked me to my car, and as I was getting in, he said, "You'll see. Harmony Creek always gets what it wants." I drove home as fast as I could, feeling like I was being watched. I blocked his number and deleted him from Tinder. I figured that was the end of it, but it wasn't. A few days later, I started noticing things. Small things at first. Like, my car would be parked in a slightly different spot than I remembered leaving it. Or, I find a book on my coffee table that I didn't remember buying. I chalked it up to being forgetful, or maybe just stressed from the move. Then things got weirder. I started getting these weird phone calls. No one would be on the other end, just static. And I started seeing him, Liam, everywhere. I'd see him driving down the street, walking in the grocery store, even just standing across the street from my house. He never acknowledged me, never made eye contact. He was just there. I started to feel like I was losing it. I couldn't sleep. I couldn't eat. I was constantly on edge, waiting for something to happen. I told my dad about it, but he just said I was being paranoid. That small-town life was just getting to me. One night, I woke up to a noise downstairs. I grabbed a kitchen knife and crept down the stairs. The living room was dark, but I could see someone standing by the window. It was Liam. He wasn't moving, just standing there, staring out the window. I yelled at him to get out, but he didn't respond. I ran towards him, knife in hand, ready to defend myself. And then I saw it. He wasn't looking out the window at the street. He was looking at a picture on my mantelpiece. A picture of my dad. A picture of my dad when he was younger. A picture of my dad with Liam's face photoshopped over his. That's when it hit me. Liam wasn't some random Tinder weirdo. He was obsessed. Obsessed with my dad. My dad, who had apparently lived in Harmony Creek before, had left abruptly before I was born, and had clearly left some baggage behind. Liam wasn't after me. He was trying to get to my dad through me. He was trying to replace him, to become him, within my life and my perspective. I screamed, and he finally turned around. He looked at me, a strange look on his face. Not anger, not lust, just sadness. And then he was gone. I never saw him again. We moved out of Harmony Creek a few weeks later. My dad never talked about it, never explained anything. But I knew. I knew that Liam was out there, still obsessed, still waiting. And I knew that Harmony Creek had secrets that were better left buried. That Tinder profile I created? Long gone. I'm sticking to books and cats for company from now on. It's safer that way. And way less creepy. I'm trying my hardest to forget about Liam, about Harmony Creek, and about the image burned into my mind. Liam's face, photoshopped onto my dad's body in that old photograph. It's a messed up image that visits me at the worst of times. Okay, so you know how everyone has that one dating app horror story? Well, buckle up, because mine is straight out of a nightmare. It wasn't some quick jump scare, but a slow burn of dread that still gives me the creeps. It all started with a swipe right, like they always do, I guess. I was bored, scrolling through Tinder on a rainy Tuesday evening. My roommate was out with her boyfriend, and Netflix was failing me. I just moved to this small town called Havenwood for a summer internship at the local newspaper. Honestly, Havenwood was, well, havenless. Super quiet, kinda creepy, and filled with more antique stores than actual people my age. That's probably why I was on Tinder in the first place. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile picture was a little blurry, but he had this intense gaze that was strangely captivating. He looked rugged, like he spent a lot of time outdoors, which was a plus for me, since I'm always up for hiking and stuff. His bio was simple. Looking for someone to explore Havenwood with. Seemed harmless enough, right? We matched almost instantly. He messaged me right away, and we started chatting. He was witty, a good listener, and seemed genuinely interested in getting to know me. He told me he was a local, a carpenter who made custom furniture. I even creeped on his Instagram, which was mostly pictures of his work and some landscapes around Havenwood. Everything seemed legit, maybe even a little too good to be true. After a few days of texting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a walk through the Blackwood Forest, a supposedly scenic area just outside of town. I hesitated for a split second. Blackwood Forest had a reputation. Locals whispered stories about strange happenings, missing hikers, and an overall unsettling vibe. But Liam insisted it was beautiful, especially at sunset. Plus, I figured, what could go wrong in broad daylight? I mean, it would be a walk with someone I matched on Tinder. I agreed, telling my roommate about the plans before I left. The day of the walk, the sky was overcast, which already set a weird mood. I met Liam at the trailhead. He was taller than I expected, with piercing blue eyes and a quiet demeanor that was a bit unnerving. He was definitely attractive, but there was something off. It wasn't anything I could put my finger on, just a feeling in my gut that kept telling me to turn around. As we walked deeper into the forest, The trees grew denser, blocking out most of the light. The air grew colder, and an eerie silence fell around us. The only sound was the crunching of leaves under our feet. Liam seemed to know the forest like the back of his hand, leading me down winding paths and pointing out different types of trees and plants. He was knowledgeable and articulate, but his stories started to get dark. He told me about the history of Havenwood, about the strange rituals that were supposedly performed in the forest centuries ago. I laughed it off, but his tone was so serious, so matter-of-fact, that it made my skin crawl. We reached a clearing with a huge, ancient oak tree in the center. Liam stopped and turned to me, his eyes glinting in the dim light. He started talking about the tree, how it was considered sacred by the early settlers of Havenwood, how it was believed to be a gateway to another realm. I started to feel really uncomfortable. "Okay, Liam," I said, trying to sound casual. "This is getting a little intense. Maybe we should head back." He didn't respond. He just stared at me, his expression unreadable. Then he reached into his backpack and pulled out a small wooden box. He opened it, revealing a collection of dried flowers, herbs, and what looked like bones. That was it. I knew I had to get out of there. I turned and started running, my heart pounding in my chest. I could hear Liam calling after me, but I didn't stop. I ran as fast as I could, dodging trees and leaping over fallen logs. I didn't know where I was going, but I knew I had to get away from him. Eventually, I stumbled out of the forest and onto a main road. I flagged down a passing car and begged the driver to take me back to town. I didn't stop crying until I was safely back in my apartment. I immediately blocked Liam on Tinder and every other social media platform I could think of. I even considered calling the police, but I didn't have any concrete evidence that he'd done anything wrong. He was just creepy. For the rest of the summer, I avoided Blackwood Forest like the plague. I stayed away from Tinder and focused on my internship. I tried to forget about Liam and the unsettling walk in the woods. But then, a few weeks before I was scheduled to leave Havenwood, I was working late at the newspaper. I was researching an old article about a series of disappearances that had occurred in Havenwood decades ago. As I scrolled through the microfilm, a familiar name caught my eye: Elias Thorne. The article detailed how Elias Thorne, a local carpenter, had been suspected of abducting and murdering several young women in the 1970s. He was never convicted, but the disappearances stopped after he mysteriously vanished himself. The name Elias Thorne triggered something in my head. It sounded very familiar. Then it hit me. My grandma once told me a story about my great-grandpa who was named Elias. My blood ran cold. I dug deeper, searching for any connection between Elias Thorne and Liam. That's when I found it. An old family tree online. And there it was, plain as day. Liam Thorne, grandson of Elias Thorne. But that's not the worst part. As I stared at the family tree, I noticed something else. Underneath Liam's name, there was a date of birth, 1895. That couldn't be right. There had to be a mistake. I searched for Liam Thorne online, hoping to find some clarification. And that's when I found the obituary. Liam Thorne, born in 1895, died in 1972. He had been dead for decades. Buckle up, because mine is a doozy. I swear, it still creeps me out to think about it. It all started, like most of these things do, with boredom and a questionable profile picture. I was swiping through Tinder one night, procrastinating on a massive history paper about the Roman Empire. I wasn't really looking for anything serious, just someone to grab coffee with, maybe watch a movie. You know, standard college student stuff. That's when I saw him. His name was, well, let's call him Mark. He had this intense gaze in his profile picture, like he was staring right through the screen. He wasn't conventionally handsome, kind of angular features, dark hair always a little messy, but something about him was captivating. He had this bio that was all cryptic and poetic, talking about finding beauty in the darkness and stuff. Red flag? Maybe. But I was feeling rebellious and kind of drawn to the mystery. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. The conversation was odd. He didn't ask the usual stuff, like what I was studying or what my hobbies were. He wanted to know about my dreams, my fears, what I thought happened after death. Deep stuff. I found myself opening up to him in ways I usually didn't with people I'd just met online. He seemed genuinely interested, like he really wanted to understand me on some fundamental level. After a few days of this intense messaging, he suggested we meet up. He wanted to go to this old park on the outskirts of town. He said it was secluded and beautiful, especially at night. Now, any sane person would have said no. Meeting a stranger in a deserted park at night. That's practically a horror movie cliché. But something about Mark's intensity and the way he seemed to know me made me say yes. I told myself I'd be careful, and that I could always leave if things got weird. Famous last words, right? The night of the date was overcast, the moon barely peeking through the clouds. The park was even creepier than I imagined. The trees were gnarled and twisted, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something almost metallic. Mark was already there when I arrived. He was leaning against a huge oak tree, his silhouette outlined against the dim light. He looked even more intense in person. He greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. We started walking deeper into the park. The conversation was even stranger in person. He kept asking me about my childhood, focusing on moments of sadness or trauma. He seemed to be trying to unlock something within me, to expose some hidden vulnerability. I started to feel really uncomfortable. I wanted to leave, but I was also weirdly compelled to stay. We reached a clearing in the center of the park. There was an old, stone fountain in the middle, covered in moss and grime. It looked like something out of a fairy tale, but a twisted, dark fairy tale. Mark stopped and turned to me, his eyes gleaming in the darkness. He started talking about the park, about how it was a place of power, a place where the veil between worlds was thin. He said that he had brought me there because he sensed a connection between us, a shared destiny. I was officially freaked out. I took a step back, my hand instinctively reaching for my phone. He noticed and his expression changed. The friendly intensity was gone, replaced by something cold. He took a step towards me, and I could see his eyes were wider, pupils dilated. He started talking faster, his voice rising in pitch. He rambled about some ancient ritual, about how we were chosen, about how we had to complete something. I finally snapped. "I'm leaving," I said, my voice trembling. I turned and started to run, but he grabbed my arm. His grip was surprisingly strong. I tried to pull away, but he wouldn't let go. "You can't leave," he said, his voice low and menacing. "We're connected now. You have to stay." Panic surged through me. I kicked him in the shin, and he finally released me. I ran as fast as I could, stumbling through the darkness, the sound of his footsteps echoing behind me. I didn't stop running until I reached the edge of the park and flagged down a taxi. I went straight home and locked myself in my room. I blocked Mark on Tinder and every other social media platform I could think of. I didn't sleep that night. Every creak and groan of the house sounded like him coming to get me. The next day, I told a few of my friends what happened. They were horrified and told me to report him to the police. I considered it, but I was also embarrassed and scared. I didn't have any proof, and I was worried that he would retaliate if I involved the authorities. I tried to put the whole thing behind me, to chalk it up to a bad date with a crazy guy. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something wasn't right. The way he talked, the things he said, it all felt too real, too intense. A week later, I was scrolling through the local news online when I saw it. A headline about a missing person. A young woman about my age had disappeared from her apartment. The article included a picture of her. And that's when the real horror set in, because the missing woman looked exactly like me. Not just similar, but almost identical. Same hair color, same eye color, same facial features. The only difference was a small birthmark on her neck, which I didn't have. I started to piece things together. The way Mark had seemed to know me, the way he had focused on my childhood, the way he had talked about destiny. He wasn't interested in me. He was interested in someone who looked like me. I was just a stand-in, a temporary replacement, until he found the real target. He needed someone that looked like me for whatever ritual he was talking about, and I just happened to swipe right. It wasn't about me at all. The police found her a few days later, in a shallow grave not far from the park. The case is still unsolved. I've since moved away from that town, changed my hair, and try to stay away from dating apps altogether. It still gives me chills to think about how close I came to being her, to being a victim of someone else's twisted obsession. And it makes me wonder, even now, if Mark is still out there, looking for another girl who looks just like me. Okay, so listen to this, because I still get chills thinking about it. It's not a ghost story or anything, but it messed with my head way more than any horror movie ever could. It's about this Tinder date I went on last summer. I swear, I almost ended up on some true crime podcast. I was bored, freshly single, and swiping through Tinder like it was my job. I came across this profile of a guy named, let's call him Mark. His pictures were decent, not professionally done or anything, just normal shots of him hiking, at a brewery, stuff like that. He seemed pretty average, but his bio was what got me. He wrote something about loving old bookstores and obscure documentaries. I'm a sucker for that kind of thing, anything slightly intellectual. So I swiped right. We matched, obviously, and started chatting. He was witty, pretty responsive, and asked me actual questions about myself, which is a rarity these days. We talked for a few days, and he suggested meeting up for coffee. Standard first date stuff. I should have paid more attention to the red flags that started popping up subtly during our conversation. For example, he was really insistent on picking the place for the date. He suggested this cafe I had never heard of, way out on the edge of town, practically in the middle of nowhere. He said it was super cozy and had amazing atmosphere. I thought nothing of it. The day of the date rolls around, and I'm already feeling a little uneasy. The cafe was even further out than I imagined, located in this old, run-down strip mall. The parking lot was practically empty. I almost turned around right then and there, but I'd already put on makeup and everything. Plus, I had this weird feeling of wanting to know what it was about this guy. The cafe itself was strange. It was dimly lit, almost cave-like, with mismatched furniture and weird, antique decorations. There were only a few other people inside, all sitting alone and looking miserable. The barista looked like she hadn't slept in days. Seriously, the vibe was off. Mark was already there, sitting at a table in the back corner. He looked different than his pictures. Not uglier, just off. He was paler, and his eyes seemed to be a little too intense. He greeted me with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes and pulled out a chair for me. We ordered our coffees, and the conversation started awkwardly. He didn't really ask me anything about myself. Instead, he talked about himself. He talked about his passion for collecting rare books, specifically first editions of obscure horror novels. He went into excruciating detail about the bindings, the paper quality, the authors' lives. I pretended to be interested, but I was actually trying to figure out how to make a polite escape. Then, he started telling me about this one book he was obsessed with. He said it was a super rare, unpublished manuscript about a woman who slowly loses her mind after moving into an isolated cabin in the woods. He described the plot in detail, focusing on the woman's increasing paranoia and delusions. It was honestly kind of disturbing. As he talked, I started feeling increasingly uncomfortable. The cafe seemed to get darker and colder, and I kept getting the feeling that someone was watching us. It was probably just my anxiety, but I couldn't shake it off. He then did something that made my skin crawl. He reached into his bag and pulled out a small, leather-bound notebook. "I've been writing my own version," he whispered, a gleam in his eye. "I think you'd be perfect for the main character." I laughed nervously and told him I wasn't an actress, but he just kept staring at me, that unsettling smile plastered on his face. "I think you have the perfect look, the perfect fragility," he insisted. That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I made some excuse about having a family emergency and stood up to leave. He tried to stop me, grabbing my wrist a little too tightly. I pulled away, mumbled an apology, and practically ran out of the cafe. I drove home, practically hyperventilating. I blocked Mark's number and deleted Tinder off my phone. I spent the rest of the night feeling paranoid and jumpy. The next day, I decided to do some digging. I Googled the cafe where we met, and the results were unsettling. There were several reviews mentioning the creepy atmosphere and weird clientele. One review even mentioned a rumor about the owner being involved in some kind of cult. Then, I decided to Google Mark's name. That's when things got really weird. I found a news article about a missing woman who disappeared a few years ago. The article mentioned that she was last seen at a coffee shop on the edge of town. The coffee shop was the same cafe where I met Mark. The article also mentioned that the police had interviewed a man named Mark who was known to frequent the coffee shop. He was described as a collector of rare books with an interest in obscure horror novels. My blood ran cold. I immediately called the police and told them everything. They took my statement and said they would look into it. I didn't hear anything back for a few weeks, and I started to think I was just being paranoid. Then one day, I got a call from a detective. He told me that they had reopened the missing person case and that my information had been helpful. They had brought Mark in for questioning, and he had confessed to killing the woman. He had lured her to the cafe under the guise of a date, just like he had done with me. He confessed that he was obsessed with recreating scenes from his favorite horror novels, and the missing woman had fit the role he had envisioned. The detective told me that my call had likely saved my life. Here's the twist. After the arrest, the police searched Mark's apartment. They found a notebook, just like the one he had shown me on our date. Inside, there was a detailed outline for a horror novel. The main character was a young woman who moves to a small town and meets a charming but disturbed man who collects rare books. The man becomes obsessed with her and eventually lures her to a remote location. The last entry in the notebook was a description of the perfect murder weapon, a vintage coffee grinder that he had found at an antique store. The detective told me that they found the coffee grinder in Mark's apartment. It was covered in the missing woman's blood. It was the same coffee grinder that was sitting on the counter at the cafe where I met Mark. The same coffee grinder that the barista used to grind my beans. The thing that really messes me up is the barista. She was always there, quiet and looking like she knew more than she let on. I can't help but wonder if she was in on it, if she was helping him find his perfect victims. I never found out. I try not to think about it much. I deleted Tinder and never got on it again. It's still creepy to this day. I never thought I'd be telling this story, mostly because I tried to bury it so deep even I almost forgot it. But then my cousin started swiping on Tinder, all bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, and I had to warn someone. So here goes. Get ready, because this is messed up. It all started, like these things usually do, with a cute profile. I was bored, freshly single after a pretty lame breakup, and swiping mindlessly one Friday night. His name was Daniel, and his pictures were all outdoorsy, hiking, kayaking, the kind of guy who looks good in a flannel and a beanie. My type, basically. He had this easy smile that seemed genuine, and his bio was short and sweet, something about loving dogs and craft beer. Standard Tinder fare, but he seemed normal, which, let's be real, is a win on that app. We matched, and he messaged me almost immediately. We talked about the usual stuff, what we did for work, our favorite Netflix shows, travel dreams. He was witty, asked thoughtful questions, and actually seemed interested in getting to know me. No creepy vibes, no weird requests, just normal conversation. I was actually kind of impressed. After a few days of texting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed a coffee date at this little cafe downtown, the kind with mismatched chairs and local art on the walls. It sounded perfect, low pressure and casual. I agreed, feeling a little flutter of excitement. The cafe was exactly as he described, cozy and inviting. I got there a few minutes early and snagged a table by the window. I was fiddling with my phone, trying to look cool and nonchalant when I saw him walk in. And he was even better looking in person. Seriously, he had these piercing blue eyes and this slightly crooked smile that made my stomach do a little flip. The date went great. We talked for hours about everything and nothing. He was funny, intelligent, and genuinely easy to be around. There were no awkward silences, no desperate attempts to fill the void. We just clicked. When he walked me back to my car, he leaned in and kissed me goodnight. It was a perfect first date kiss, the kind that leaves you wanting more. Over the next few weeks, we became inseparable. We went on hikes, saw movies, cooked dinners at each other's apartments. He was sweet, considerate, and always made me laugh. He even remembered the little things, like my favorite kind of flowers or the way I like my coffee. It was like he was reading my mind. Things were moving fast, maybe too fast, but I was so caught up in the whirlwind romance that I didn't want to pump the brakes. I was happy, genuinely happy, for the first time in a long time. Then, things started to get weird. It started subtly. Little things I could easily dismiss as coincidence or overthinking. Like the time I mentioned a childhood memory, and he responded with, "Oh, I remember that too." But he couldn't have remembered it because he wasn't there. Or the way he always seemed to know what I was thinking before I even said it. It was like he was inside my head. Then there was the incident with my cat, Mr. Fluffernutter. Mr. Fluffernutter is a grumpy old thing who hates everyone except me. But Daniel, Mr. Fluffernutter adored him. He would rub against his legs, purr like a motor, and even let Daniel pick him up, which he never does. It was creepy. The weirdest thing, though, was the dreams. I started having these incredibly vivid dreams. Dreams that felt so real I could almost touch them. In the dreams, I was in a place I'd never been before, a dark and twisted forest with gnarled trees and a thick, suffocating fog. And Daniel was there, always there, leading me deeper and deeper into the woods. I tried to brush it off, telling myself it was just stress or a weird reaction to all the changes in my life. But the feeling of unease kept growing, gnawing at me from the inside. One night, I woke up in a cold sweat after another one of those dreams. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong. I looked over at Daniel, who was sleeping soundly beside me. As I stared at him, a wave of dread washed over me. I didn't know why, but I suddenly felt like I was in danger. I slipped out of bed and went to the living room, tried to calm myself down. I needed to think, to figure out what was going on. I started scrolling through his Instagram, looking for something, anything, that would explain the strange feeling that had taken root inside me. And then I saw it, buried deep in his feed, an old photo from years ago. It was a picture of him standing in front of a house I recognized. It was my childhood home. I zoomed in on the photo, my heart pounding in my chest. In the background, barely visible, was a figure standing in the window. A young girl. Me. I scrolled through the comments, looking for any clues. And then I found it. A comment from a friend. "Still obsessed with her, huh? You've been watching her for years, man." The blood drained from my face. I felt like I was going to be sick. He had been watching me. For years. I frantically searched his name online, desperate to find out who he really was. And that's when I found the article. A news report about a missing girl. A girl who disappeared from my neighborhood when I was a kid. Her name was Sarah. The article mentioned a suspect, a neighbor who had been questioned but never charged. His name was Daniel something. I didn't wait to find out his last name. I grabbed my keys and ran out of the apartment, not stopping until I was miles away. I never saw Daniel again. I changed my number, deleted my social media, and moved to a different state. I tried to forget what happened, to erase him from my memory. But I couldn't. The dream stopped after I left, but the fear lingered. I knew he was still out there, somewhere. Watching. Waiting. The police reopened Sarah's case, but they never found anything concrete. Daniel vanished without a trace. I tried to move on with my life, to build a new normal. But the truth is, I'll never be the same. I'll always be looking over my shoulder, wondering if he's out there. And the worst part is, I still don't know why he chose me. Why he spent years watching me, waiting for the right moment to insert himself into my life. Maybe he thought I was Sarah. Maybe he just wanted to play a sick game. Or maybe, just maybe, he actually thought he loved me. But here's the thing, that's not the twist. I did some digging on my own, after everything. I know it was reckless, but I needed answers. I found out who Sarah really was, and why Daniel was so obsessed. She was his sister. They were separated when they were young, and he never stopped looking for her. He thought I was her because we looked so much alike. He wasn't a monster. He was just lost and broken, searching for a piece of his past. It doesn't excuse what he did, but it makes it a little less terrifying, a little more human. I still don't know if that makes it better or worse. Listen up, because this is seriously the creepiest thing that's ever happened to me, and I still get goosebumps thinking about it. It all started, like most bad decisions these days, on Tinder. I was bored, swiping through the usual suspects. Guys holding fish, guys flexing in the gym mirror, guys who looked suspiciously like they still lived with their mom. Then I saw him. His profile was different. His pictures weren't your typical shirtless selfies or group shots with the boys. They were artsy, like black and white photos of him in what looked like abandoned buildings. One was of him standing in a doorway of this old, creepy-looking house, and another was of him staring out a broken window. He was attractive in a brooding, mysterious kind of way, with dark eyes and messy hair. His bio was short and cryptic, exploring the forgotten corners. I know, major red flag now that I think about it, but at the time, I was intrigued. I swiped right, and we matched instantly. He messaged me almost immediately, and we started talking. He was surprisingly witty and intelligent, and we had a lot in common, like a shared love for old movies and weird music. He told me his name was Silas, and he was a photographer who specialized in documenting abandoned places. He said he found beauty in decay, which I thought was kind of deep. After a few days of chatting, he asked me out. He suggested meeting at this old abandoned train station just outside of town. I know. It sounds like the beginning of a horror movie, but I was young and dumb and thought it sounded cool and adventurous. Plus, he was really cute. The train station was even creepier in person than I imagined. It was surrounded by overgrown weeds and rusty fences, and the building itself was crumbling and covered in graffiti. The air was thick with the smell of damp earth and something else, something metallic and unsettling. Silas was already there when I arrived, leaning against a crumbling wall. He looked even better in person, all dark and mysterious against the decaying backdrop. He smiled when he saw me, and for a moment, I forgot all about the creepy location. We spent the next few hours exploring the train station. He showed me all the hidden nooks and crannies, telling me stories about the station's history and the people who used to travel through it. He pointed out interesting details that I would have never noticed on my own, like the faded murals on the walls and the intricate carvings on the old ticket booths. As the sun began to set, the train station became even more ominous. The shadows grew longer, and the wind howled through the broken windows, creating an eerie atmosphere. I started to feel a little uneasy, but I didn't want to ruin the mood. Silas seemed to sense my discomfort. He led me to a small room at the back of the station, which was surprisingly intact. It had an old wooden desk and a chair, and a single window that looked out onto the tracks. "This was the station master's office," he said, his voice low and intimate. "He used to sit here and watch the trains come and go." He sat down in the chair and gestured for me to sit on the desk. I hesitated for a moment, then climbed up and sat down, my legs dangling over the edge. He started telling me about the station master, about how he was a lonely man who had lost his wife and child in a train accident. He said the station master used to spend hours staring out the window, waiting for a train that would never come. As he spoke, his voice became more and more hypnotic. I felt like I was falling into a trance, like I was actually there with the station master, watching the trains pass by. The room seemed to grow colder, and I could have sworn I heard the faint sound of a train whistle in the distance. Then, Silas did something that made my blood run cold. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small, silver pocket watch. It was old and tarnished, and it had a strange symbol engraved on the back. "This belonged to the station master," he said, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. He used to carry it with him everywhere he went. He opened the watch and showed it to me. The hands were frozen at 3:17. "This is the exact time of the accident," he whispered, "the time his wife and child died." He held the watch out to me, and I instinctively recoiled. I didn't want to touch it. It felt cursed. "Take it," he said, his voice insistent. "Hold it. Feel the energy." I shook my head, but he grabbed my hand and pressed the watch into my palm. The metal was ice cold, and I felt a jolt of electricity shoot through my body. Suddenly, the room began to spin. The walls seemed to close in on me, and the sound of the train whistle grew louder and louder. I felt like I was being sucked into a vortex, like I was losing control of my own mind. I tried to pull my hand away from the watch, but Silas wouldn't let go. He held my hand tightly, his eyes fixed on mine. "Don't be afraid," he said, his voice soft and soothing. "Let the past wash over you. Let it consume you." I screamed, but no sound came out. I was trapped, paralyzed by fear. Then, just as I thought I was going to lose my mind, I heard a noise. It was a car pulling up outside the train station. A car door slammed, and I heard someone shouting, "Silas! Silas, where are you?" Silas's grip on my hand loosened, and he turned his head towards the sound. His eyes widened in panic. "I have to go," he said, his voice trembling. "I'll see you later." He dropped my hand and ran out of the room, disappearing into the darkness. I was left alone, trembling and terrified. I stumbled out of the station master's office and saw a woman standing outside, looking around anxiously. "Are you okay?" she asked, rushing towards me. "I heard you scream." I told her everything that had happened, about Silas and the train station and the creepy pocket watch. She listened patiently, her expression growing more and more concerned. When I finished, she sighed and shook her head. "I'm so sorry," she said. "Silas is my brother. He's not well. He has a history of mental illness, and he's been obsessed with this train station ever since he was a child. He really needs help." She then took me back to her car and drove me home. I was really freaked out, and I wanted nothing to do with him again. A few weeks later, I was scrolling through a local history website and saw a picture of the old station master. The caption mentioned that he had a son who was sent to a mental institution after his father's death, due to him believing that his father was still communicating with him via the watch. I clicked on another article to find out more, and there it was, a picture of a young Silas, looking eerily similar to the man I had met at the train station, except the picture was dated 1925. Okay, so you know how everyone jokes about Tinder being a dumpster fire? Well, let me tell you, sometimes the dumpster is actively trying to set you on fire. This happened to me last summer, and I still get creeped out thinking about it. I swear, I'm off dating apps for good after this one. It all started innocently enough. I was bored, scrolling through profiles, and this guy, Liam, popped up. He was different. Not your typical gym selfie dude. He had this kind of artistic, brooding vibe, like he was about to write the next great American novel or something. His pictures were mostly of him in cool, dimly lit places, coffee shops, bookstores, even a shot of him standing in what looked like an abandoned theater. He was definitely my type. I swiped right and bam, we matched. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly engaging. Not just the usual, "Hey, how's it going?" He asked about my dreams, my fears, the last book I read. Deep stuff, you know. He was super into poetry, which I always thought was kinda lame, but he made it sound cool. He even sent me a poem he wrote, and honestly, it was pretty good. Dark but good. He talked a lot about feeling disconnected from the world, which, okay, I could relate to on some level. We messaged for like a week solid, and I was starting to get a little obsessed. Then he suggested we meet up. I was hesitant at first because, hello, stranger danger. But he was so persistent, and I was so intrigued, that I caved. He suggested the small, independent bookstore downtown, the one I'd always meant to check out, but never got around to. It seemed like a safe, public place, so I agreed. The bookstore was even cooler than I imagined. All dusty shelves and the smell of old paper. Liam was already there, sitting in a worn armchair in the back, looking even more intense in person. He was taller than I expected, with these really piercing eyes that seemed to look right through me. We talked for hours. About books, about life, about everything and nothing. He was really good at listening, and I found myself opening up to him in ways I usually didn't. He had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room, the only person in the world. It was intoxicating, to say the least. As the evening went on, the bookstore started to empty out. The owner, an older woman with a kind face, gave us a knowing smile as she locked up. Liam suggested we go for a walk. I hesitated, but he said he knew a cool spot by the river. I figured, what could go wrong? The cool spot was a little more secluded than I expected. It was a deserted stretch of the riverbank, with overgrown weeds and crumbling concrete. The moon was hidden behind the clouds, and the only light came from the distant city glow. It was atmospheric, to say the least. We sat down on a broken bench, and Liam started talking about the river. He said it held secrets, that it had seen things we couldn't even imagine. He started reciting another one of his poems, this one about a drowned woman. her body lost in the murky depths. It was kinda creepy, honestly. Then he started getting closer. He put his arm around me, and I felt a jolt of unease. His touch was cold, almost clammy. He started whispering in my ear, his voice low and husky. He wasn't saying anything romantic, just strange, fragmented thoughts about darkness and oblivion. I tried to pull away, but his grip tightened. His eyes were fixed on me, and they looked different. They weren't the eyes of a poet anymore. They were the eyes of someone empty. I managed to wriggle free and stood up. "I think I should go," I said, my voice trembling. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, watching me, a faint smile playing on his lips. I turned and ran. I didn't stop running until I reached the main street, my heart pounding in my chest. I jumped into a taxi and told the driver to take me home. I spent the rest of the night tossing and turning, replaying the evening in my head. I kept seeing Liam's eyes, that empty, vacant stare. I tried to tell myself I was overreacting, that he was just a weird guy, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was seriously wrong. The next day, I did some digging. I searched for Liam online, but couldn't find anything. No social media, no profiles, nothing. It was like he didn't exist. Which was weird, right? Everyone has some kind of online presence these days. Then I remembered the bookstore. I decided to go back, hoping the owner might know something. When I walked in, she greeted me with a warm smile. "Oh, hello again. I see you and that young man had a lovely time." I hesitated. "Actually," I said, "I was wondering if you knew anything about him. Liam, his name was. He seemed like a regular." The woman's smile faded. She looked at me with a strange expression. "Liam," she said. "Dear, there hasn't been a Liam working here in years. Not since." She trailed off, her eyes clouding over with a distant sadness. "Not since what?" I pressed. She sighed. "Not since Liam passed away. He was a lovely young man. Worked here while he was trying to get his poetry published. He loved that spot by the river. Tragic, really. Fell in one night. Drowned. They never found his body." My blood ran cold. I stared at her, speechless. "Are you feeling okay, dear?" she asked, her voice full of concern. "You look a little pale." I mumbled something about feeling unwell and stumbled out of the bookstore. I needed to get away, to process what I'd just heard. I drove straight to the riverbank, to the spot where I'd sat with Liam the night before. The bench was still there, broken and overgrown. I looked out at the murky water, and a wave of nausea washed over me. Then I saw it, a small, tarnished silver ring lying on the ground near the bench. I picked it up. It was engraved with a single word, Liam. I dropped the ring like it was on fire. I turned and ran, screaming, all the way back to my car. I drove home, locked myself in my apartment, and didn't come out for days. I deleted Tinder, blocked any number I didn't recognize, and started sleeping with the lights on. I tried to convince myself it was all a bad dream, a figment of my imagination, but I knew it wasn't. Weeks later, I went through my old phone when I was upgrading. I found the poem Liam sent me, still saved in my notes. I opened it up, ready to delete it, and that's when I noticed something I missed the first time. Underneath the poem, there was a small, cryptic note. It read, "She looks just like you." She? Who was she? And why did I need to look like her? That's when I remembered the owner's story, the drowned girl in the river. And suddenly, I understood. He didn't want me. He wanted me to be her. Well, buckle up, 'cause mine's a doozy. It's the kind of story I only tell after a couple of beers, in a dimly lit room, because honestly, even thinking about it still gives me the creeps. Forget the awkward dates and the guys who only want one thing. This was something else entirely. I was scrolling through Tinder. You know, the usual. Swipe left, swipe right, trying to find someone who didn't look like they'd peaked in high school. Then I saw him. Liam. Dark hair, intense eyes. A smile that seemed genuine. His profile was pretty minimal. Just a few pictures of him hiking and a line saying he was looking for someone to explore the city with. Seemed harmless enough. Maybe even kinda cute. I swiped right. He swiped right back. Instant match. We started chatting, and things moved fast. Like suspiciously fast. He was charming, witty, and seemed genuinely interested in everything I had to say. He asked about my hobbies, my dreams, even my weird obsession with collecting vintage postcards. It was like he was reading my mind. I was hooked. After a few days of nonstop texting, he suggested we meet up. He suggested this place called the Whispering Gallery, a supposedly haunted art gallery tucked away in the older part of the city. I'm usually not into the whole spooky thing, but something about him, or maybe it was the thrill of doing something different, made me say yes. Looking back, that was my first mistake. The gallery was exactly how you'd imagine, dusty, dimly lit, with portraits of creepy old people staring down at you from every wall. Liam was already there when I arrived, standing in the entrance, looking even more attractive than in his pictures. He greeted me with a warm smile and a kiss on the cheek that sent a weird little flutter through my stomach. We wandered through the gallery, Liam acting as my personal tour guide. He knew all the stories behind the paintings, the history of the building, even the names of the artists I'd never heard of. It was impressive, but also a little unsettling, like he'd spent way too much time in this place. As we walked deeper into the gallery, the air grew colder, and the shadows seemed to lengthen. I started to get this prickly feeling on the back of my neck, like someone was watching us. We ended up in this small, circular room with a single painting hanging on the wall. It was a portrait of a woman with piercing blue eyes and a melancholic expression. Liam stopped in front of it, his eyes fixed on the painting. "She's beautiful, isn't she?" he said, his voice barely a whisper. I nodded, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The woman in the painting looked familiar, like I'd seen her somewhere before. Liam started telling me about the woman in the painting. Her name was Eleanor, and she was a talented artist who had died tragically young. He said she used to wander these very halls, searching for inspiration. He spoke about her with such passion, such obsession, that it started to freak me out. Then he turned to me, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You know," he said, "you remind me so much of her." I laughed nervously. "That's flattering, I guess." But he didn't laugh. He just kept staring at me, his gaze intense and unwavering. He started talking about how we were destined to meet, how Eleanor had led him to me, how we were meant to be together forever. That's when I knew I had to get out of there. I made some lame excuse about having to be somewhere else, but he didn't let me go easily. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "Don't go," he pleaded, his voice desperate. "We're just getting started." I pulled away from him, my heart pounding in my chest. I ran out of the gallery, not stopping until I was back on the busy street, surrounded by people. I blocked Liam on Tinder, on my phone, everywhere. I didn't want to hear from him again, but the feeling of being watched lingered. I couldn't shake the image of his intense eyes, his obsessive words. Weeks passed, and I slowly started to forget about the whole thing. I convinced myself that I just had a bad date, that Liam was just a weirdo with a crush. But then, one day, I was at my grandma's house. We were going through old family photos, reminiscing about the past. My grandma pulled out an old, leather-bound album. "This is your great-great-aunt Eleanor," she said, pointing to a faded photograph. I gasped. It was the woman from the painting, the woman Liam was obsessed with. My grandma went on to tell me about Eleanor. She was a talented artist who had died tragically young in the Whispering Gallery. She had been obsessed with by a mysterious suitor. It was said that he had been the one who had pushed her. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Liam, about his obsession with Eleanor, about his words. "We're just getting started." I started researching Liam online, but there was nothing. No social media, no job history, no trace of him anywhere. It was like he didn't exist. Then I found it. A small, online forum dedicated to the history of the Whispering Gallery. Someone had posted a picture of a man who looked exactly like Liam, standing in front of the Eleanor painting. The caption read, "The gallery caretaker, been here for decades, knows everything about the place." Beneath it, someone had responded, "He looks exactly the same as he did 50 years ago, when my grandfather worked there." I stared at the screen, my blood running cold. The gallery caretaker. Liam. He hadn't just reminded me of Eleanor. He'd been waiting for her. The painting wasn't just a painting. It was a trigger. It was him, preying on someone. I had been so close to being another victim. I deleted Tinder forever this time. Okay, so, I'm not usually one to spill my guts online, but something seriously messed up happened to me last summer, and honestly, I just need to get it off my chest. It all started with a swipe. A right swipe, to be exact, on Tinder. I know, cheesy, right? But hear me out. I was bored, fresh out of high school, and my friends were all coupled up. Scrolling through the app was more of a time killer than a serious quest for love. Then I saw him. Liam. His profile picture was this artsy, black and white shot of him leaning against a brick wall, looking all mysterious and brooding. He had these intense, dark eyes, and his bio just said, "Looking for adventure." Seemed harmless enough, maybe even a little intriguing. We matched instantly. I was a little surprised, to be honest. He seemed cooler than me, if that makes sense. But whatever, I went with it. We started chatting, and he was surprisingly easy to talk to. He wasn't all cheesy pickup lines or anything. He actually asked me about my interests, my dreams, my fears. We talked about everything from our favorite movies to our weirdest childhood memories. It felt real. After a week of texting, he suggested we meet up. He proposed this secluded spot down by the old redwood forest. It's a little ways out of town, not really well known to tourists. He described it as this hidden gem, a place where you could really get away from it all. I'll admit, the location gave me pause. Usually, I'm all for public places for first dates. But something about Liam, the way he talked, made me feel like I could trust him. Plus, the redwood forest was always my favorite place. When I was little, my grandpa used to take me there, and to see this secluded spot felt special. So, against my better judgment, I said yes. The day of the date was beautiful. The sky was a clear blue, and the air was crisp and clean. I was nervous, of course, but also excited. I spent way too long trying to decide what to wear, finally settling on a simple sundress and sandals. I wanted to look cute, but not like I was trying too hard. I drove to the meeting point Liam had given me, a small parking lot at the edge of the forest. When I got there, he was already waiting, leaning against his beat-up Jeep. He looked even better in person, taller somehow. His eyes were even darker and more intense than they'd seemed in his photos. He smiled when he saw me, and that smile sent a weird little flutter through my stomach. "Hey," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Glad you made it." We started walking into the forest, following a narrow trail that led deeper and deeper into the trees. The redwoods were massive, their towering trunks blocking out most of the sunlight. It was cool and damp under the canopy, and the air smelled like pine needles and damp earth. As we walked, we talked. He told me about his love for nature, his passion for photography, his dreams of traveling the world. I told him about my plans for college, my love for art, my desire to make a difference. After about half an hour, we reached the spot he described. It was a small clearing, hidden away from the main trail. In the center of the clearing was a huge redwood, its trunk so wide it would take several people to wrap their arms around it. The tree had a huge hole on its base. The hole was big enough to fit a person inside. The clearing felt strangely peaceful, but there was an eerie aura to it. We sat down on a fallen log and continued talking. The sun was starting to set, and the light filtering through the trees was casting long, eerie shadows. I started to feel a little uneasy. Maybe it was just the isolation, the fact that we were completely alone in the middle of the forest. Liam noticed my discomfort. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching mine. "Yeah, I'm fine," I said, trying to sound convincing. "Just, it's getting a little dark." "I brought a flashlight," he said, reaching into his backpack. "Don't worry." He pulled out a small flashlight and switched it on, its beam cutting through the growing darkness. He pointed it to the hole in the tree. "This used to be a hollow where people leave notes or their names. It's tradition." He stood up and walked towards the tree. "Come on," he said, gesturing for me to follow. "I want to show you something." Hesitantly, I stood up and walked towards the tree. As I got closer, I noticed something strange. The hole in the tree wasn't just a natural cavity. It looked like it had been carved, like someone had deliberately shaped it into a certain form. And that form, it looked disturbingly like a coffin. A wave of nausea washed over me. I felt a chill run down my spine, despite the warmth of the evening air. "Liam," I said, my voice trembling. "What is this?" He didn't answer. He just stood there, staring at the hole in the tree, a strange smile playing on his lips. The flashlight was pointed inside the hole, and for a second I saw something glimmering. I stepped closer to see it. Then, he turned around, and everything changed. His eyes were no longer warm and inviting. They were cold and empty, like the eyes of a dead man. The smile on his face was no longer friendly. It was a cruel, twisted grin. "I wanted to give you a real adventure," he whispered. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong, and started pulling me towards the hole in the tree. I struggled against him, but he was too strong. I screamed, but my voice was swallowed by the vastness of the forest. He shoved me towards the hole in the tree, towards the dark, coffin-shaped opening. I managed to twist away from him at the last second, stumbling backward. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, my heart pounding in my chest, my breath coming in ragged gasps. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I had to get away from him. I could hear him behind me, his footsteps pounding on the forest floor. He was gaining on me. I tripped over a root and fell, sprawling on the ground. I looked up and saw him standing over me, his face contorted with rage. He reached down to grab me, and I closed my eyes, bracing for the worst. But then something happened. A loud bark shattered the silence. I opened my eyes and saw a huge dog, a German shepherd, standing between me and Liam. The dog was snarling, its teeth bared. Liam froze. He looked at the dog, then at me, then back at the dog. He hesitated for a moment, then turned and ran in the opposite direction. The dog stayed by my side until I managed to stand up. Then it started walking towards the main trail. I followed it, my legs shaking. When we reached the parking lot, I saw a woman standing next to a car, looking frantic. "Max!" she cried, running towards the dog. "Max, where have you been?" She hugged the dog tightly, then looked at me. "Are you okay?" she asked, her voice filled with concern. "Max found you, didn't he? He's a good boy." I nodded, unable to speak. The woman drove me back to town. I sat in the passenger seat, trembling, unable to stop the tears from streaming down my face. I never saw Liam again. I blocked his number, deleted his profile, and tried to erase him from my memory. But the image of that hole in the tree, the look in his eyes, still haunts me to this day. I'm still not sure what his plan was. Maybe he was just a creep, a weirdo who got off on scaring people. Or maybe he was something more sinister. I don't know, and I don't want to know. A few weeks later, I went back to the redwood forest. I went back to the clearing, back to the tree. I wanted to see it again, to confront my fear. The hole in the tree was still there, still shaped like a coffin. But something was different. Inside the hole, nestled among the decaying leaves and twigs, was a small, wooden box. Curiosity overriding my fear, I reached into the hole and pulled out the box. It was old and worn, with a faded inscription carved into the lid. I opened the box. Inside was a collection of photographs. Old photographs, dating back decades. Photographs of young women. Each one of them looked eerily similar to me. It all started, like, last fall. I was bored, recently single, and my best friend Maya kept bugging me to get on Tinder. She was all, "It's the 21st century, Liam. Everyone's doing it." So I caved. Swiped through a bunch of profiles, mostly just looking for someone who seemed remotely normal and had a decent smile. That's when I saw her profile. Her name was Clara, and her pictures were striking. Not in a typical Instagram model kind of way. She had this intense gaze, like she was looking right through the camera. Her bio was short and a little cryptic. "Lost in the woods, searching for my way out." I know, total cliché, but something about it just grabbed me. Maybe I was just feeling emo that week. We matched, obviously, and her messages were even weirder. She didn't ask me about my job, or my hobbies, or any of the normal stuff. She asked me if I believed in fate, if I ever felt like I was being watched, and if I knew the old legends about the woods surrounding Blackwood Creek. Blackwood Creek wasn't too far from where I lived, A small town with a reputation for being, well, kind of creepy. Lots of old houses and tangled forests. I tried to keep the conversation light, deflect a little, but she kept bringing it back to these dark, unsettling themes. Still, I was intrigued. I told myself it was just curiosity, a little thrill of the unknown. Stupid, I know. After a week of these weird exchanges, she suggested we meet up at Blackwood Creek at night. Red flags, I know. Red flags everywhere. My gut was screaming at me to say no, to block her number and run. But my brain, being the idiot that it is, decided this was an adventure. I told Maya about it, and she practically had a heart attack. Liam, are you insane? That sounds like the beginning of a horror movie. But I was stubborn. I convinced myself I could handle it, that I was just meeting a quirky girl in a public place. I promised Maya I'd text her every hour and share my location. The night of the date, I drove out to Blackwood Creek. The town was even creepier than I remembered. Dilapidated houses, with boarded-up windows lined the main street, and the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and decaying leaves. There were barely any street lights. It was like something out of a movie, but not in a fun way. Clara told me to meet her at the edge of the woods, near an old abandoned mill. I parked my car, heart pounding, and walked toward the trailhead. The deeper I went, the darker it got. The trees loomed over me, their branches like skeletal arms reaching out. Every rustle of leaves sounded like footsteps. Finally, I saw her. She was standing beneath a gnarled oak tree, her face pale in the moonlight. She was even more striking in person, but there was also something unsettling about her eyes. They were too bright, too intense. We didn't really talk. She just smiled a slow, unsettling smile, and gestured for me to follow her deeper into the woods. Again, every instinct in my body was screaming at me to turn around, but I was frozen, like a deer in headlights. We walked for what felt like forever, deeper and deeper into the darkness. The forest closed in around us, and the only sound was the crunch of leaves under our feet. I kept checking my phone, but there was no signal. I hadn't texted Maya in hours. Then we came to a clearing. In the center of the clearing was a circle of stones, and in the middle of the circle was a well, an old stone well with a dark, gaping mouth. Clara stopped at the edge of the well. "This is where they sleep," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "The ancient ones. They're waiting to be awakened." I stared at her, my blood running cold. "What are you talking about?" She turned to me, her eyes glowing in the darkness. "I'm their vessel," she said. "I'm here to bring them back." That's when I saw it. A glint of metal in her hand. A knife. I didn't wait to find out what she planned to do with it. I turned and ran. I ran as fast as I could, crashing through the undergrowth, stumbling over roots. I could hear her behind me, her laughter echoing through the trees. I don't know how long I ran, but eventually, I made it back to my car. I fumbled with the keys, got inside, and locked the doors. I didn't stop driving until I was miles away from Blackwood Creek. I called Maya, and she was hysterical. She reported me missing. The police searched the woods, but they found nothing. No Clara, no well, no circle of stones. They said it was probably just some prank or a bad dream. But I know what I saw. I know what happened. I tried to move on, to forget about it. But the memory of Clara's eyes, the sound of her laughter, haunted me. I deleted Tinder, obviously. I avoided the woods. I tried to convince myself it was all just a bad dream. Then, a few weeks ago, I saw something that made my blood run cold all over again. I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw a picture of Clara. She was tagged in a post by a friend of a friend. But it wasn't the same Clara. This Clara had a different last name, a different hometown, and the caption under the picture read, "So happy to finally meet my cousin Clara. She's visiting from out of state." I clicked on her profile, and that's when I saw it. A picture of her standing in front of an old stone well in Ireland. It all started pretty normally. I was bored one Friday night, scrolling through Tinder, when I saw this guy, Liam. He wasn't, ridiculously hot or anything, but he had this kind of artsy vibe, Messy brown hair, kind eyes. Pictures of him hiking in the woods and sketching in a notebook. Seemed cool, seemed normal. His profile said he was into photography and old movies, stuff I was into too. We matched and I thought, hey, why not? We chatted for a few days, mostly about movies and music. He seemed genuinely interested in what I had to say, which was already a step up from half the guys on that app. He was a little intense, maybe, asking a lot of personal questions pretty quickly, but I just figured he was eager. Red flag number one, I guess. But I was too busy being flattered to notice. He suggested we meet up for coffee. I picked a busy cafe downtown, just to be safe. He showed up wearing this long, dark coat, even though it was a pretty warm day. I remember thinking it was a little odd, but I brushed it off. He was actually kind of cute in person, even if he was a bit quiet. The coffee date went fine, I guess. He was a good listener, and we had a decent conversation. He kept staring at me, though, like he was trying to figure something out. It made me a little uncomfortable, but not enough to bolt. He walked me back to my car, and as he was saying goodbye, he slipped a small, wrapped gift into my hand. It's just a little something, he said, with this weirdly intense look. I thought you might like it. I thanked him, feeling a little weirded out, and drove home. I waited until I was inside before opening the gift. It was a vintage music box. It was pretty, I guess, but something about it felt off. It played this really old-fashioned tune, and as I listened to it, I got this strange, uneasy feeling, like I was being watched. The next day, Liam texted me, asking if I liked the music box. I told him it was beautiful, even though I still felt weird about it. He immediately asked if I wanted to go out again. I hesitated, but he was so persistent, and honestly, I didn't have anything else going on. So I agreed. This time, he suggested we go for a walk in the woods near his house. I was a little hesitant, remembering the dark coat and the intense stares, but I told myself I was being paranoid. I told a friend where I was going and what time I expected to be back, just in case. The woods were creepier than I expected. It was late afternoon, and the trees were so tall and dense that barely any sunlight filtered through. Liam led me down a narrow, overgrown path, talking about the local flora and fauna. He seemed to know a lot about the woods, almost like he was part of them. As we walked deeper, I started feeling more and more uneasy. The air was still and silent, except for the occasional rustling of leaves. I kept looking over my shoulder, feeling like someone was watching us. Liam didn't seem to notice anything, though. He just kept talking, his voice low and hypnotic. He led me to this clearing with an old, gnarled oak tree in the center. There was a small, moss-covered stone bench beneath the tree. He gestured for me to sit down. I did, feeling like I was in some kind of fairy tale, but not the good kind. He sat down next to me, and for a moment, we just sat there in silence. Then he turned to me, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You remind me of someone," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Someone very special." I felt a chill run down my spine. "Who?" I asked, my voice trembling slightly. He didn't answer. He just reached into his coat and pulled out a small, silver locket. He opened it, and I gasped. Inside was a tiny, faded photograph of a young woman. She looked almost exactly like me. "Her name was Evelyn," he said, his voice filled with a strange mixture of sadness and longing. "She was the love of my life. But she disappeared a long time ago, lost in these woods." My heart started pounding in my chest. I stood up, backing away from him. I have to go," I stammered. He grabbed my arm, his grip surprisingly strong. "No, please," he said, his eyes pleading. "Don't leave me. I've been waiting so long to find you again." I struggled to free myself, but he wouldn't let go. I was starting to panic. I yelled, hoping someone would hear me, but my voice was swallowed by the silence of the woods. Then I saw something glinting in his hand, a small, silver knife. I screamed, kicking and clawing at him. He stumbled back, dropping the knife. I didn't waste any time. I turned and ran, blindly crashing through the undergrowth. I ran as fast as I could, not stopping until I reached the edge of the woods. I ran all the way to my car, jumped in, and locked the doors. I didn't stop driving until I was back in my apartment, safe and sound. I called the police and told them everything. They took me seriously, but they couldn't find Liam. He'd vanished without a trace. I spent the next few weeks terrified, jumping at every shadow, afraid he would come back. I deleted my Tinder account and swore off online dating forever. Then, a few months later, I got a call from the police. They had found Liam. He was living in a small cabin deep in the woods. They said he was mentally ill, obsessed with a woman named Evelyn who had disappeared years ago. They found a scrapbook in his cabin filled with pictures of Evelyn and pictures of me, pictures he had taken without my knowledge. They also found a music box I had thrown away after our first date. They told me I was safe now, that Liam was getting the help he needed, but I still couldn't shake the feeling that I had been incredibly close to becoming another page in his creepy scrapbook. But here's the twist. A year later, I was helping my grandma sort through some old family photos. That's when I saw it. A picture of my great-aunt Evelyn. She looked exactly like me. And standing next to her, with his arm around her waist, was a young man who looked exactly like Liam. My grandma told me he was Evelyn's fiancé, who had died in a car accident shortly before she disappeared. Apparently, she never got over his death and ran away. So, Liam wasn't just some random crazy guy. He was a descendant of Evelyn's fiancé. He was drawn to me because of my resemblance to her. And maybe, just maybe, he wasn't trying to hurt me. Maybe he was just lost. Still creepy as hell, though.